everyone. So nice to be here. Thank you for that great introduction. A little bit more about me because you haven't heard enough yet. Is that in my HR background, I worked with Fraser Health Authority for 8 years and a couple more years in the construction industry. And at that time, I was highly trained in different modes of conflict resolution, including courses throughout just the Justice Institute. I got clear leadership training and also this instrument that I'm going to be discussing today. So there's a lot of background here, as you know, in healthcare. Tensions can rise high sometimes, and it means a lot. There's a lot at stake in a lot of situations. Let me introduce you to, as Carissa did a beautiful job of introducing the TKI instrument. So if you haven't heard of it before, this instrument was developed in the 70s, and it was developed by Thomas Kilman and, Kenneth Thomas and Ralph Kilman, and that was just called the TKI. And it was actually based on an older model from the 1960s. And it really looks at 5 main conflict handling modes that we as humans tend to fall into. And I want to really help you today to understand your mode of conflict. This is a high overview. This workshop is 1 to 2 days long to fully understand it. But I wanted to give you a taste and flavor so you understand yourself better. So I'm going to start off by defining what conflict is, as is seen by the TKI model. I'll introduce the 5 different conflict modes, and I want you to think about, as I work through this, which one is your preferred mode. We all have one preferred mode, maybe 2. And then we have another mode we really lack skills in. And the concept of this whole TKI tool is that to become good at conflict, we actually master all 5 skills that TKI presents us with. And we'll also, when discussing each of the modes, I'm going to talk about some of the benefits of each mode and some of the misuses or when it's overused. What I hope you get out of this is that you start to understand your conflict skills, because we all already have some skills here. And I want you to identify some new opportunities of dealing with conflict, some new styles or different plans you might have when, not if, but when you experience some type of conflict. And at the very end, I will briefly talk about how to determine with situations and which conflict mode to use. This will be very high level for today, but I think still useful. So let's help you identify some of your modes. Now, in the PDF that I've provided you as well, you can go ahead and there's 10 questions in there. It's not the TKI instrument, but there are different questions I've developed to help you understand what your preferred mode is. Today, in the slides, I will only go through 5 of them, but I think you'll probably get a good taste of it. I want you to take a moment to read this question and consider this for yourself. What do you usually do when someone makes a decision that you disagree with in a meeting? Now, I did fail to mention that I love interaction in these workshops, and I will, after introducing each mode, I will say, are there any questions? And Carissa can read them out. I'm happy to answer as we go. So think for yourself, what is it that you typically do in a meeting if you disagree with the decision that's being made? All right, and then the next questions I want you to consider, and this is which of these 5 values that I'm about to talk about feel the most true for you in conflict, when you feel that you're in conflict. Number 1, is your biggest value getting results and standing firm? Or is it creating a shared understanding with others? Is that your bigger value? Perhaps it's finding a middle ground quickly, maybe it's avoiding emotional escalation, or potentially it's maintaining harmony and relationships. Now, I think I know what you're thinking, which is that all sound really good, and it is hard to pick the top one. But I encourage you to think about if you had to pick the top one that typically is most important in conflict for you, which one would it be? And write that down for yourself, as we'll kind of refer this back to this throughout the workshop or the webinar. All right, let's talk about what conflict is. So TKI defines conflict as any situation in which your views or your desires are not in agreement with another person's, right? So your views or your desires or your needs are different than another person's views or needs. That's it. That's conflict. Nothing needs to be said or done in order for that to happen. And the second part of that is that there's also then a perception that, hey, if I get my views heard, then you won't get yours heard. If I get my needs met, then you won't be able to get your needs met. So if those two things are true, conflict has just happened. And so it's simply a condition where concerns or needs are not being met and appear to be incompatible with another person or people in the room. That's it. That's conflict. Many people do mistake conflict to look like fighting, arguing, blaming, name calling, and so on. That's conflict already escalated, but conflict starts much earlier than that. Now, I do want to point out, and I imagine I have some managers and supervisors in this workshop here, that surveys do show that managers spend about a quarter of their time handling some form of conflict. In my human resources time, I remember that could be quite a bit higher sometimes, depending on the department. They have to do things like negotiate over resources, right? Handle disagreements over policies, deal with complaints from their employees, patients, enforce rules, or manage the inevitable friction that happens between people, between two employees or a patient and employee. Now, I do want to point out for the TKI model, especially, conflict doesn't necessarily look like this. It can look like just a disagreement. It can look like this when it's escalated, but there are also healthy modes of conflict. Conflict can actually be an opportunity to get a deeper understanding of your own needs. I apologize. I'm working from home today, and my dishwasher gets very excited when it's finished. And it can be a very healthy way of getting to understand your own needs and also the needs of others. And when you can do this in a way that is healthy and curious, this can actually deepen relationships, move projects forward, and create a better work environment. The truth, though, is that conflict is inevitable. If you are working with another person, another human, conflict will happen at some point. So if you're someone who's really proud, and I did a lot of interviewing, and there was that beautiful question in interviews where tell me about a time you've experienced conflict, and you respond to me that nope, I've never had conflict, then I know then I automatically know what your preferred conflict mode is, and you'll figure that out in a moment. But the point is, conflict can look in different ways. So in the TKI model, there are two axes here that we look at that all of the five conflict modes land on. One is assertiveness. Assertiveness is this axis here and is the level to which I am going to make sure I get what I need in a situation. So at the top here, I am concerned only about what it is I get, and I make sure I get what I need. At the bottom here, it means I'm not concerned or will not speak out about my needs. And on the bottom axis here, we have cooperativeness. So on the high end here, that means I'm going to do everything I can to make sure you get what you need. And at the bottom level here is I'm going to not do anything to make sure you get what you need. Now, this gets a little bit tricky because these may appear to be opposites, but they are not. They can coexist, and I'll show you in one of the modes how that can happen. So we have these two modes, and TKI defines your conflict mode as the situation that's happening, plus what your level of skills in conflict are. And that is what results in what your conflict mode is. Are there any questions about this at this point? All right. So here are the 5 conflict modes that I'm going to go into, and they are competing, collaborating, compromising, avoiding, and accommodating. And as you can see, they have been placed on their respective places on the 2 axes of assertiveness and cooperativeness. So let's jump into the first one, and that's competing. As you can see, so competing is a win-lose. If we have a pie, this means I'm getting everything and you're getting nothing. That's my stance. It's my way or the highway. On the axis, it falls as the highest on assertiveness. So I'm getting what I need, and I'm not going to be as concerned about you getting what you need. Now, there are times when this, because I know how negative this might seem, and this typically where we imagine that negative, toxic conflict happening, where you have a lot of arguing or debating, where it can get a little bit ugly. But there are times and situations where this conflict mode is actually important, and the skill of having this is important. So, for example, if we need to take quick action, let's say that there's a fire in the building and we need to leave. I might be saying, you're listening to me, no one else. You're doing what I'm telling you right now. Or you might know that your department requires a big change and it has to happen now. There's a huge time limit, and you know that you have the most information or expertise around it. So you're going to assert your own opinion or your own instructions. It can be also helpful if you're having to make an unpopular decision, like cuts or moves, and you know that there's no option there. So this is a good time to use this as well. Also protecting yourself, standing up for yourself, or vital issues. So if there's something that you value highly, you know that you will not compromise on, and you want your voice to be heard, this is when you would use the skill of competing to do that. And also being able to stand up for yourself, I think is really important. So if you answered on the initial screening, the 5 questions, if you answered that your preference, that what you value most in conflict is getting results and standing firm, then this is potentially what your preferred conflict mode is. I would also like to point out that you might have different conflict preferences depending on the relationship or environment. So, what maybe you have, how you show up with your boss versus a colleague might look really different. How you show up at work versus at home might look quite different. I have worked with certain leaders who show up incredibly accommodating at home and then competing at work, or vice versa, which I find fascinating. All right, let's talk about some of the skills that competing has that's really beneficial, which is the skill of being able to argue or debate, the skill of being able to stand in a moment saying, I am the one that is of rank here. I have the most information or expertise, so we need to move in this direction because I see the best next move. Asserting your opinion or feelings, and standing your ground as well. Now, this is important because if you are someone, especially for those that I work with who don't have the skills to stand up for themselves, those clients know the value of being able to stand up for yourself. It is a very painful moment when you are mistreated or something goes not your way and you have no skills to be able to speak up. So this is a skill that I do value. And another one is being able to state your position clearly. So if you're someone who is already quite good at arguing, debating, And I'm Eastern European, so sometimes this was a skill I was good at. But the skill here is that you can state your position clearly, right? And this is something I find is a developed skill is that you can clearly state your thoughts and your needs. And that is not true in some of the other modes. Now, there is a cost of overusing this specific mode. So if you're someone who uses this and maybe only this, or this is your preferred one, there is a cost to this to your team. If you are, let's say, a leader in a position where you're constantly using this type of mode, you're going to not get as much feedback or opinions or challenges on your opinions, and that can be really toxic and harmful because there might be your team members who see a better way, who have other information that they're now not comfortable or willing to share. So that results in a reduced learning. This means that you don't learn as much in situations. You might not learn about what's happening in your department, and others are not don't have an opportunity to also learn. So, especially if you're in a leader role, this might look like micromanagement. Right. So if you constantly have control over every situation, your team is, or even I've seen this in colleagues as well, but now your team members don't have an opportunity to learn for themselves, to innovate, or to move forward. They feel low empowerment on a team that is not able to make their own decisions. And then you get surrounded by yes people. Sounds nice, maybe. I get it. But it can be really harmful in the long run as you don't have that innovative approach and are not able to make changes that are more, that can help everybody. So if this feels like a mode that is a preference for yourself, the reflective question I challenge you to consider is what is it that you're trying to protect or achieve when you're competing, when you're using this form um, of conflict? Now, also, if you are someone who isn't able to use this mode at all, right? You have no competing skills, there is a cost to that as well. And it's a little bit of opposite of what I just spoke. So if you're not able to speak up and speak up for yourself and think about your needs and be able to speak to express them, you have restricted influence. You're not able to have your opinions heard. You're not able to have things go your way potentially or have things change for betterment for yourself. That also leads to indecision. So let's say, especially if you're on a team where you have a leader who's not able to use this skill, there might be a lot of debating, there might be a lot of input from the team all the time, and you might constantly find yourself in a place where there's a lot of indecision. And delayed action, right? So especially when you need things to go fast, this can be really tricky to use. Withholding contributions. So this is a big one that I work with certain clients who don't have the skill of speaking up for themselves. And that is that they start to stay very quiet in meetings. They're not able to speak up for themselves, especially if, I ask that first question, what if there's a decision making being made that you disagree with? And you're not speaking up with what are legitimate concerns or input that can really change the situation that everybody else in the room might not know about or ideas of a different solution. We're missing that, right? If you don't have the skill, we now are missing that piece. And so before I introduce the next mode, does anyone have a question around this specific mode of conflict? Chris, are there any questions?
I don't see any questions right now, but people could still be typing, mostly just comments on their conflict styles.
Oh, perfect. Okay, good. Great. So let's learn about the next one. And this one is collaborating. This lands on that spot where you are now getting what your needs met and making sure someone else's needs are also met. This is a beautiful style and is actually what I see quite often being taught in leadership courses. In healthcare, when I was in healthcare, this was a style that was being taught more often. And I'm in MBAs, we're seeing this style being taught as an option because what we see typically is either competing, avoiding, or accommodating in workplaces. So, what is collaborating? So, this is creating that win-win situation for both yourself and someone else. This is the two heads are better than one. I'll use a very basic example just to demonstrate what these can sound like very quickly. So let's say that we're going out for lunch and you're someone, you want sushi today and I don't. I've already had sushi. So let's say in the competing style, you say, nope, that's what I want. This is what we're doing. You either coming or you're not because this is where we're going. So that would be the competing style versus the collaborating, which might mean that we sit down together and we figure out, well, what is it that you don't want? What is it that you do want? So I want sushi. I don't want sushi. What else can we do? What is an option here that could satisfy us both? And this is where a lot of innovation can come up. A lot of new ideas and new ways of doing things can come up because we might have that discussion and realize, hey, you know what? I would love to actually get takeout for you get takeout sushi. I'll get my own takeout. We're going to go to a park and both eat and have what we both need. And that is a basic example, but I think it demonstrates that it's not that it's me or you, but we have a problem on the table here in front of us. How are we going to solve it? What are some options that we can do? We have that conflict. So like I said, it's integrating multiple solutions potentially, and learning. This style really encourages for you to ask curious questions, to ask yourself questions you might not have considered of why is sushi important to me today? But on a deeper level, going into what we use in coaching as the five whys of really truly understanding why something is important so that then we can integrate or create a solution that still maybe feels really satisfying to me, but isn't necessarily that obvious first solution that I may have thought is the best one. So it also encourages to merge perspectives. If you have a team, you're using the strengths of your entire team to come together and come up with their own solutions. And what that does is it gains commitment. If we have a solution, we have an action we need to take. Now everybody has a much deeper commitment naturally because they had a say in what is being done and they feel heard. So it can really improve relationships. The downside is that it takes a lot of time, right? So this is not something you can do if it needs to be a really quick decision. This can be those meetings that, we have to have three different meetings around. We have to come together multiple ways, ask these questions. It requires a lot of openness from everybody and requires skills for you to be able to sort of EQ skills for you to understand what your needs really are, not the top ones, and also be able to ask curious questions to someone else to understand what their needs are. So, in the skills I just discussed, but it's that ability to empathize, to listen, to make space for someone else, to ask questions, to ask yourself questions, to combine answers. It's a really good skill. It's non-threatening confrontation. What do I mean? I might challenge you like, hey, can you go deeper on that? Why is it that you need that solution? Can we ask what parts of that are actually really important to you? Let's go a little bit deeper. So this is non-threatening, but still confrontation. Like, let's go further with something. Your ability to analyze input. So let's say you have a team, we're having different needs discussed, we have different ideas and solutions discussed. Someone who's really good at collaborating can analyze all that input, information, and put out what feels most important, can analyze it in a way that we can then utilize. And someone who's really good at collaborating, so really high EQ skills, can really look at underlying concerns. I might say, no, not me, I don't have any ideas, or actually that's all I want is this piece. And you go, no, 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 something's deeper here. Let's really explore that further. As I mentioned, this can be overused. And so if you're someone, you're an amazing manager, I have worked with some amazing managers who do have a skill of using collaborating. The problem is that that's all you use all the time. You're going to be spending too much time on issues that might not need this type of input from everybody. So sometimes we have different modes, quicker ways of solutions. So this collaborating solution would be on matters that really are important to everybody or are going to impact everybody in a deeper way. If you're also someone that uses collaborating too much, you might be not taking the responsibility where you need to just speak up and say, this is what we're doing, this is what we need to do, and you're diffusing that to everybody else. Why don't you make that decision and so that you're not blamed and you're not taking that responsibility piece is when you're overusing it. And if people might start taking advantage if they know that this is the mode you're going to use, they might start to always think that they have an opportunity for input when in fact they shouldn't. And again, we're talking about a lot of meetings. We're talking about a lot of discussion potentially on matters that don't require it. And then that becomes that workload issue for everybody. And if you are someone who prefers this mode, I encourage you to consider for yourself, when might I be complicating things by over collaborating? When am I actually doing this too much and making it too difficult? On the flip side, if you don't have collaborating skills at all, and you're either avoiding or you're asserting or you're constantly competing, and then people don't feel like they're able to have their own voice heard and their needs met. And so therefore they're less likely to commit to the solutions. They might feel low empowerment. They're not able to have a say or do what they need to do in their positions because it's always someone else making the decision. And we see a huge loss of innovation when people feel like they're not able to contribute. Maybe um, their opinions are not even asked. People are less likely to even feel inspired to innovate or to create. Feel free to ask any questions about this mode before we jump to the next one. All right, next we go to compromising. This is the let's make a deal. This becomes a win-lose and it's in the middle of this structure here. This is that I understanding we're going to split the difference. I'm going to compromise on this, what my needs here. You're going to compromise on your needs there. So part of our needs are not going to be met, but it's an opportunity to meet in the middle. And some of our needs are met, and we're giving up certain things. And that's then in that middle point of you're getting a little bit of what you need, I'm getting a little bit of what I need. Uh, This might be your preferred niche if you answered that finding middle ground quickly was your biggest value in conflict. So being able to move really quick through that. So this is a really good time mode to use if you need to do it quickly, and things are not that important. They're got moderately important. They're not unimportant, but we can compromise a few things. It could be a good mode if you now want people to feel some commitment and some power and that they're getting something that they need in that situation. It can be a really good mode to create temporary solutions. So if you know it's something important, it's an important issue, we will need to take some time to maybe go into more collaborative mode later on, but we need a decision now. This might be a good time to use it. It is faster. And also, as you are in an ideal world, someone who can use all five modes, this might be a good way to back up decisions you had made by using either the competing style or the collaborating style. With the competing style, you now want someone to feel like, hey, I do have a say. I will get what I need when I didn't in the style used before. In the collaborating style, we've taken a lot of time. We now need to move a little bit quicker. So let's say the next issue comes up, compromise might be a good one to use at that point. Some of the skills you have, if you're already really good at this, is negotiating, right? Being able to go back and forth. I know that for a long time, the idea of compromise was the way that you would solve conflict in a lot of texts. And I think it's what I love about the TKI model is that it's just one mode, and it's not necessarily always the best mode, but it has some really, really valuable skills. And being able to find the middle ground, so really understand and dig quickly to see where you're willing to step back or you're willing to not have your needs met, and where you're actually, what's important to you that you're not willing to give up, and also being able to find that with someone else. Those are skills, those are that EQ, the emotional intelligence skills that can be really valuable in a workplace. Your ability to make concessions. Now, this is a TKI quote here, and I love this because I picture one manager I worked with who was very high competing style, and she very rarely would be able to walk away from any type of situation without getting her way. And I thought what an interesting skill to have is to be able to walk away knowing that you didn't get certain things met and still being okay with that, and how that can actually be a skill if that's not your preferred mode. And another skill you would have here is you can assess value of things. So you can assess that this is valuable to me, that's actually more valuable to them. I can let this go because it's less valuable. What can you do? Let go. I remember this was a mode I heard couples using or being encouraged to use when they're having a slight need not being met or having to make a decision. One using a scale of 10, quickly saying, how important is this to you? This is a 9 for me. Okay, this is only a 6 for me. Okay, so you get to go and let's say make this decision. We'll do it your way. I don't know if that would work for every couple, but I thought that was an interesting compromising style that, again, really quickly moves you through that moment. Overusing, compromising. Now, I personally, having been in HR and worked as a coach with professionals, haven't really seen people overusing this one. But if you are someone who does, something that can happen is you lose a big picture perspective because you're always looking at those small things you can trade. Things are tradable. You're kind of looking at things like a game, and so you might not be able to now look back and see at the overall big picture of how things move together. There's a lack of trust of people around you that might develop because now everything is tradable. If that's the only thing you know how to do and you always compromise and are asking for compromise, you might be that, let's say if you're a manager, you might be that person that's going to let go of an employee or let go of a trade for a budget. I'm thinking of sports team, but where things are dispensable that maybe shouldn't be. And that creates that lack of trust from people around you. And it might also then create a cynical climate because everything is compromisable. Everything can be given away. Nothing holds as much value if you're overdoing this. If this is your style, and I would invite you to reflect, when do you settle too quickly just to keep the peace? Right? So when are you just settling on a quick compromise rather than exploring some of the other modes that might take a little bit more time, or other than maybe not keeping the peace in order to stand up on something that is really important? If you're underusing compromising, so if you don't have any skill in this area of being able to compromise, you might be finding yourself in unnecessary confrontations where maybe matters are, again, of moderate importance. They're maybe have some value, but not huge value. And you're maybe using that competing style to hash it out when it's actually not the best way to move forward and can be very confusing and frustrating to those around you. Might feel those constant power struggles of it's me and you. I better get what I need, or you're going to get what you need. Now it starts to feel like we're in that kind of uncomfortable power struggle situation. Oops. All right, and then you're not able to negotiate effectively. I've seen this on the opposite side as well, where you're now not able to speak up for your needs quickly and are willing to give up things that might actually be important to you, and just to kind of move forward and not have to deal with conflict. If you are underusing compromising and you never use this style, I would invite you um, to consider what situations in your life might deserve a quick and fair trade-off where you're still valuing what your needs are, you're valuing what the other person's needs are as well. Now we're going to the lower part of this model, and we're now exploring avoiding. Now, avoiding is at the very lowest form of place. So I'm not getting what I need, and you're not getting what you need. Now, because I do work with quite a few female professionals and female leaders, I do see this also as a popular option. In certain cultures, it's actually considered the best way to deal with conflict. And the idea about avoiding is that I'll think about it later. If Fred calls, just tell him I'm not here, or I'm just ghosting on emails, I'll just deal with it later and putting things off. And the idea is that we both lose. No one gets what their needs met in this kind of mode. When should you use it? So you are might want to be avoiding if you want to leave unimportant issues. Something's really not that important to you or generally not important. Someone's maybe very excited about it or finds it really important to them. It's an opportunity for you to just avoid and leave it alone. Maybe you already know you're coming out of a meeting, you have been had a tough month in your department and it's been really tense. Maybe an issue's coming up that is important, but you're not wanting to introduce more tension to the moment. And so you choose to avoid this issue and put it off to deal with it later to reduce that tension. You can buy yourself time. I also work with a lot of professionals to learn how to speak their needs and how to build their own professional boundaries. And this is a skill I teach them is to buy yourself time to understand how you want to deal with this situation. So you might say, I'll get back to you on that after lunch. I'll get back to you tomorrow on that. That gives you that opportunity to decide which mode am I going to use? How important is this for me? Am I willing to go and really stand up for myself here? Or is this something maybe that I want to explore a new mode on? Maybe you know your limitations. Maybe an issue's coming up and you know you don't have the skills to deal with it, or you need more time to go and explore or learn something in order to be able to deal with that issue. And allowing others ownership. So in that leadership role, if you're wanting someone else to step up, you're wanting someone else to feel like they have that responsibility, feel some empowerment, you might avoid and say later on and see if they figure out that issue on their own. My husband's a contractor and he sometimes finds that certain issues, when they're not too important, start to sort of resolve themselves if he just gives it a little bit of time. So again, appropriately used, this can be quite positive. And this might be you if you answered that you value most as avoiding emotional escalation in conflict. Some of the skills you might have, if you're already quite good at avoiding, are being able to withdraw. Right. Again, I'm picturing that this isn't necessarily like a completely positive skill to have all the time, but in your toolbox, if you're able to be someone who can emotionally kind of go a step back for a moment, it can be really strategic. You can sidestep, which means you can go around an issue, not discuss it because you need some time to figure it out. It might give you a better sense of timing, saying this is a bad time to deal with this issue. Let's figure out a better time. And your ability to leave things unresolved. Can be a big one because you're walking, especially if it's an issue that might be somewhat important to you, now walking around with that frustration or that internal conflict because your needs aren't met, and you have to sit with that, right? All right. If you're overusing avoiding, so I have seen this quite a bit. If you're now that is the only mode or the thing you do if there's any type of conflict, um, you're going to experience a lack of input from you. So eventually, what I see is people getting really internally frustrated or feeling quite unfulfilled in their work because they have very little input, empowerment, say in how things go. And they just sit in that frustration. Something I saw in my workplace, which was frustrating, and I did avoiding at this time as well. So we would have these huge team meetings, and we'd have leadership come in and really give a lot of space and openness in having input from everybody to solve a problem. And they'd have suggestions on how they wanted to solve it. And they would ask, do you think that's a good idea? Do you think that we should do it this way? And no one would say anything. But guess what would happen 5 minutes after that meeting was over, right? Everybody's now complaining, like, can you believe they're going to do that? No, no, no. But no one spoke up. And so that is that moment where lack of input from you is actually creating almost that, I don't want to say toxic, but there's that moment where you're very dissatisfied and unfulfilled in work. Decisions will be made for you by default, right? Not making a decision is a decision. Not making a choice is a choice. That was a hard one to wrap my head around, but that is true. And it festers issues. So just because you're avoiding conflict doesn't mean it goes away. You can pray, you can hope, but if you know that saying where you're just putting things under the rug, you're scraping under the rug, well, it doesn't work forever. And what we've seen is that the issues that may have been maybe not even that important now become a huge piece. Maybe the influence how you interact with someone, they influence your attitude towards work, and they really fester and become bigger than they maybe could be or should be. So if you are someone who does tend to go into avoiding as your conflict mode, I invite you to reflect, what is it that you're hoping to protect or avoid by not going into this conflict? If you're underusing avoiding, so if you're someone who doesn't know how to avoid an issue and you always, always need to resolve everything right there on the spot, um, you might now have hostility from others or hurt feelings because sometimes the timing isn't right, or issues are maybe not that important and we're now creating issues. Even if it is collaborating, even if it is compromising, you're still constantly exhausting that moment of always handling things. Potentially work overload, that again, you don't have give people a break to just go and work. We're always solving an issue. Excuse me, one last point. And there might be a lack of prioritization or delegation. So if you're someone that's always of never able to avoid, you might not be allowing that moment where someone else is able to step up or prioritize things, or you might not be able to delegate things and always have to do things yourself. If you are underusing avoiding, if you feel like you haven't actually used this mode in conflict before, I invite you to reflect that when has stepping back for you, given you some clarity, or maybe help de-escalate a situation. Just going to ask if there's any questions or comments. There's not too many. All right, good. And the last mode here, we have accommodating. This is where we're ensuring someone else's needs get met, but not our own. So it is win-lose. I apologize, that's not here. It's a win-lose because the other person's winning, but I'm losing. My needs are not going to getting met. The idea is it would be my pleasure. In that sushi example for lunch, we're saying, sure, whatever you want. You want to, go to this terrible sushi restaurant where I got food poisoning last time. Yeah, no problem. I'll just eat later, being overly accommodating or completely accommodating. However, if you answered maintaining harmony and in relationships is your biggest value, this might be a beautiful place that you do go to in conflict. Is it the best one? Not necessarily, but there can be a lot of value in having the skill to doing, to working with it. So you're able to this is good to use this last mode here when you're showing reasonableness with someone else. Maybe I've used a different mode with you before. Maybe we're just getting to know each other, and I'm willing to show my good faith. I'm willing to really help you get what you need. When you're developing performance in someone else, so hey, Cecilia, yes, you do it your way. I'm gonna support you in doing it your way, even if I disagree completely, because I want you to learn. I want you to either make mistakes or innovate or try something new. When you're trying to create goodwill, as I mentioned, when you just want to keep the peace, things are quite tense and it's not that important. You don't mind your needs not getting met and you're just okay with someone else getting their needs met. It can be really, beneficial if you're dealing with someone who is in an overly constant competing mode and the tension's going to be extreme and they are willing to go into those arguing, debating tactics. You might just accommodate, you might solve it by just constantly accommodating because you're not willing to go into that mode. Or when you just need to retreat and you say, yeah, let's do it this way. I was just thinking, so with summer coming up, like you guys do it this way. I'm going on vacation anyway. I'm going to retreat. We'll deal with it later. There's some really great times I'm sure you can think of as well, where accommodating can be also a good mode, even though your needs are not getting met. Some of the skills, if you're accommodating and good at this, is being able to forego your own desires, having that moment where you know your needs are not going to be met. The idea of selflessness, right? So that your other people's get what they need, I don't get my needs met potentially. Obedience, again, if you find yourself in an environment where you are in a position where someone is always enforcing things, your ability to be obedient can be a skill, and your ability to yield to others. It can be great self-regulation to be able to use some of these skills. So, if you're someone who doesn't accommodate often, these are some of those skills that maybe you do explore a little bit further. But I just want to also reiterate that conflict is still there. So just because we've ignored our own needs, just because, let's say, we've avoided or accommodated the conflict of someone's needs not getting met, which are maybe my own, that does not go away, right? And that is unhealthy. It comes out in later ways. Conflict will somehow come out one way or another. Even if that means, I've seen professionals just walk off the job because they've been avoiding accommodating, and then the one day they go, I just can't do this anymore, and they get out. So their conflict does still exist, even if you're choosing these modes. All right, so I already spoke to this, but if you're overusing accommodating, your ideas might be overlooked as you're always defaulting to someone else's ideas. Maybe you're feeling not that confident in your own ideas, but you're maybe selling yourself short. You have restricted influence in how things go in your work, in your environment. You're not able to, you have low empowerment. And for me, I think with both avoiding and accommodating someone coming from human resources and what I've seen kind of negative part when people prefer these modes is that we don't get that contribution. We don't get those ideas from folks who are maybe right there and see the problem a different way. We don't see a different option for solution. So we're really, I think everybody loses when people do this too much. If you are someone who uses accommodating too much, consider where you're constantly putting others' needs ahead of your own, right? Sometimes we call this people pleasing as well. I won't just, that was TK. I will not go into the anarchy of accommodating at the moment. But you might also be underusing accommodating. So if you're someone who is maybe more versed in the modes of conflict where you get your needs met all the time, you might have a lack of rapport with others if you're never giving someone else what they're, or never meeting someone else's needs, never making sure that they get what they need. You might, as a manager or even as a colleague, start to find that there's low morale if you're always, if you're never allowing people to get their needs met. And then by the book reputation, meaning that you're always that rule follower. No, we always do it that way. There's absolutely no ifs, ands, or buts. And you don't see those gray situations where maybe there is some allowance for things going slightly differently. If you do underuse accommodating, I invite you to reflect, where could I let go of being right in order to protect the relationship? All right, I have a couple more slides here and then we will be wrapping up. But this next one is when to use these modes. I want to sort of put the two together. I know I did speak of them already, but I wanted to really go into this because the situation is important to making sure that these modes are used well. So competing TK, I suggest to use it sparingly. This is not a mode you want to overuse. This is a mode you want to really just pull out. This is a skill you want to pull out when things are really truly important to you, or you're really standing up for yourself. It's a good one if you need to be quick, if the issue is really important, there is no time, and you are the expert in that moment. You are the go-to person. Or when you have to make that really unpopular decision. I'm a mom of two kids, so I get to have to do this quite often. But making unpopular decisions, unfortunately, if they have to happen, we can't now invite someone to collaborate on something when we know that that decision has to happen no matter what. When to use collaborating, when there is time and energy for it. Collaborating is a really fantastic mode and really healing to a team when it's used at least some of the time, but you do need time and you need energy from your team to be able to do it. You need to have high trust already in the team, a high trust that you will be heard, high trust that they will be heard. You need those interpersonal skills I discussed earlier from most of the team. So if you're trying to collaborate, but you're dealing with most people who only have skills in competing or accommodating or avoiding, you might not be able to get the most out of that situation. And you need to have a team or two people who are open to new ideas, to coming up with solutions that might be different than what was expected. When to use compromising, again, when an issue is just mid of importance, it's not completely important, but we can't let it go. Again, really good if you don't have that much time, and can be good to use if you're needing to have to maintain that relationship before. Let's say you've had to make that unpopular decision and now you want people to have some say in something. Maybe you can compromise on a different issue to have your team walk away and feel like they're still empowered, that they're still considered. And that's what I mean when it can be used as a backup to competing, collaborating, or when it's not possible to do either of these. Avoiding can be a great mode, but do not avoid people, right? So you can avoid an issue and ask for time, but this whole idea that you're just going to ghost someone, you're just not going to speak of them, that's going to make an issue so much worse. So TKI always always recommends that you avoid the conflict, avoid the solution or the topic, ask for time, but do not avoid the person or the people. When you want to avoid that emotional conflict, then you know that's where it's going to go. There's issues that was little no gain. So you know someone is up here, they're really something's really important for them, and there's just no gain for you in getting into that match at the moment, and the issue's just maybe not that important. And it can be good also if there's just no time. And lastly, accommodating. Maybe you're someone that can yield to a better decision. You've heard a better decision in the room. Maybe you're someone who typically would prefer to be more considered, but you know that this decision is better and you can accommodate it. Or when you see that an issue is more important to others. It can also accommodating can be really helpful when you need to clean up hard feelings from other things that have happened. Again, when you can use these modes together. So accommodating might be a great one if you've now had to be competing on something else or you've had to have a compromise on something. I see we're at noon here, so I will drop the slide here. This is just some questions about the situation. You can find these in the PDF that I've also, it's supplementary to this webinar. So go through them. And I wanted to also include additional resources here. So if this feels like an interesting modes, if you found this really helpful for yourself, in both in seeing conflict as something that happens much earlier than what we typically think of it as happening in that moment, or if only happening arguing and debating, and understanding that you might have an opportunity to choose your mode before it escalates to what we normally consider conflict. Here are some resources. Again, they are also in the PDF. There's a few books that are also available. You can take full programs in it where they will offer a full diagnosis of what is your preferred style, and you can find some more resources on their website. I will also drop my information here if you do have any questions or if you want to follow me or get in touch. Feel free to reach out to me or follow me on LinkedIn and check out all the other work I'm doing around boundaries, assertiveness, and conflict. Are there any, I'm really happy to answer any questions you might have. Carissa, I can stop my share right now. I'm going to let me know if there are any questions.
Yeah, so if you have any questions, I'll give a couple minutes here. For answering, I'll drop that PDF again in the chat.
And Lenora, I see your comment here. Conflict happens at work daily. Exactly. Conflict is that moment where maybe you don't get your needs met, or you're going about in your happy mode, and then you don't realize that someone else's needs are not being met, and so conflict has happened, and it is just as frustrating as it sounds because we want that peace. When we understand that it's natural, I think accepting that and understanding our options can be really helpful.